for me is going to be a tongue twister. I'm going to like Toby. So Dr. Toby is easier.
Michael, the kids all call me Dr. T. So that's
Dr. T. Yeah, I like the sounds of that, but I'm going to call you Dr. Toby.
Coaching in Session.
Your exclusive destination for unparalleled personal and professional growth.
With your host, Michael Rearden.
Whether you choose to live within limits or break free, your mindset journey begins here.
Dr. Toby Travis, welcome to Coaching in Session. I want to thank you so much for coming on. Today, we're going to be talking about your work, school leadership and success, and how you help schools improve. I love to do a brief bio like that, but I always love for the guests to kind of come in, tell us who they are and how they help. If you could, tell everyone your story and what you do.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity. Pardon me. My story goes back a few years, but the most recent decades have been focused on school improvement. Been a school administrator for many years in a variety of settings, including international schools, bilingual school, private and faith-based schools. And my work in research and then in consulting has been around the focus of developing school improvement initiatives through increasing levels of trust. And what we found in the research and then in practice is the number one indicator of successful schools is trusted leadership. And so we've just discovered if you get that right, and a whole bunch of other good things just start happening. In fact, one of the stats that we talk a lot about, Michael, is 70% of school improvement initiatives, this also applies in business, by the way, 70% of school improvement initiatives fail every year. You look at, I know some of your listeners are entrepreneurs, 70% of business startups fail. And you look, okay, well, why that big number? And you look at the 30% that are successful, or the school improvement initiatives are successful. What we've discovered, it's all about implementation. And when you look at, well, what is it about the implementation that makes them successful? It's when the leadership is trusted and the leadership owns whatever the initiative or the change is. And so my work as both a school leader and also as a consultant to other schools and organizations has been around, okay, how do we ensure that there are high levels of trust? So how do we assess it? How do we protect it? How do we repair it when needed? So the framework that I developed a number of years ago called the Trust Ed framework is all based on that research and the tools that we've developed around this critical issue of we've got to ensure we've got high levels of trust. When we do that, then we find all kinds of really wonderful things start happening. Engagement, innovation. And on the school level, we say high levels of student achievement, actually a direct correlation to levels of trusted school leadership. We see that in the result of high levels of achievement, lower levels of behavior management problems. And in the workplace, we find that similarly with employees, high levels of retention of quality employees, lower cost of operations when there's high levels of trust in leadership. So that's kind of my focus, passion. Again, going back, that was what my doctoral research was based on, but really that came out of just personal experience working in really, unfortunately, somewhat toxic environments and trying to figure out, okay, why? What is going on here? And how do we address this? And so there is a personal story out of the background of that, but I can also focus and tell you just a lot of exciting stories of turnarounds that I've seen when schools and organizations are working on the right problem. And what I mean by that is working on the trust issue. In the school setting, and I'm sorry to go on and on, Michael, you stop me at any point here, but in the schools, sometimes we think the problem is literacy rates or math achievement rates. And it's like, yes, those are concerns and issues, but you're not going to get sustainable headway on those if you don't fix the human issues first. There is a popular post out on social media talks about Maslow before Bloom, and what that's talking about is, Abraham Maslow talked about meeting human needs. Bloom talked about the taxonomy of learning. Okay, how does learning happen? Well, you've got to get human needs met first before you can get high levels of engagement and results on the learning. And so that's really what the focus and the passion has been and continues to be. And I've just, again, had the privilege of walking alongside school leaders and organizational leaders as well, especially in the nonprofit sector, that have adopted these same principles in their organizations to realize, right, we got to fix this first. And when they do, again, all kinds of good things start happening.
100%. And am 100% on board with the whole idea about needs. You can look at a child that's in an inner city, maybe single parent, and maybe they're vying for attention. The mom's working, or grandma's working, or dad's working, whoever's working is working really hard. They're not giving them the intention or the attention that they're looking for, that they desire. And maybe they are not even able to make ends meet. So maybe there's no hot water, maybe there's not enough food in the house. So the basic needs are not there for that child. So when they're going in, they're not focused on, all right, let me learn this math problem, or let me learn how to read, or this book. And I'm not saying that's the case across the board, right? Because there's always going to be outliers that say, you know what, I'm going to use education in my time in schooling to change my circumstance. But most are going to be, how can I survive today? And those students are typically going to have some behavioral issues because they're seeking attention. And I remember I was a teacher for a bit too, in the city too, and right next to the big city, Bridgeport, Connecticut. And sometimes you would have kids come in and they just had attitudes, and you're just like, what side of the bed did you wake up on today? And some of the kids were just coming in hungry, like they didn't have any food. And so we would just say, hey, you know what, we'll take care of the food, go to the cafeteria, get some breakfast, and let's learn. Right. And that was enough to get them on board, versus saying, you should come equipped, you should come ready, you should have your pens and your pencils and your papers and your notebooks when I'm starting the class. Right. The reality is, in the inner city, especially, it's like you don't know what you're going to get. Right. Every day can be volatile, and some days can be like, oh, that was a nice day. So you are very excited for those nice days, but then again, you're always on your toes. And I know you have worked both in the private sector and the public school sector, and just kind of understanding about the needs and the ideas and the trust in school leadership. Which would you say is or has a better track record for having trusted leaders? Would it be the private schools, or would it be the public schools, or would it be maybe dependent on where the school is situated, located, etc.?
Well, it's a good question. It's also a little complex question, actually, I think, because one of the things that I talk a lot about, Michael, is when we're trying to diagnose the needs of any given school, it has to be contextualized to that school campus, private, public, charter, faith-based, right? And so every school is unique. I've got some good friends that are superintendents of large districts in the public sector. And they may have 60, 70 schools in their district. And one of the things that we've talked about and that they affirm is one of the mistakes we make as a school system on the public side is when we're making district-wide decisions from a central office, right? And the problem with that approach to management is every campus is different. You got different students, different community, different faculty, staff, different resources, different setting. So there's an old saying, best practice must always be contextualized. Well, that's also true in the management of a school organization, is every campus is unique. So, have there been studies on, are there higher levels of trust in private and public? Actually, I'm not familiar if that delineator has been made out there. I think on a kind of an anecdotal approach, I think we kind of assume the private sector, right? Because they do have more freedoms in how they operate, and people, if they're not happy, they're walking, right? I mean, so people are in the private school because they want to be there, and they're stepping up to pay the extra tuition or whatever that looks like. But I don't know that we can definitively say that, because I know some public schools that have got great track records of community relations and high levels of trust. And when we look at trust research that's been done in the corporate sector, the nonprofit sector, and in the school sector, actually the principles are almost identical as far as, okay, what does it take to get there? My work has been specifically looking at, okay, we know there are these 6 components of trusted leadership, but then what does that specifically mean for the school principal or the school administrator or superintendent or head of school, or even a grade level leader, right? Even in the classroom, there are principles that will trickle down. What does it mean to lead in the classroom? So we do teacher trainings as well, because the principles are universal, but the application can be very, very unique. So again, that's kind of a long answer to your question, but I don't know that we can definitively say, oh yeah, charter schools, right? They're more trusted. No, you can't say that, right? It's just I get anxious a little bit when I see news articles or blurbs that are either bashing public, private, charter. It's like, stop it. Every campus is unique, and you can't throw them all into a barrel and say, oh, well, all public schools are just, dying in trash. No, it's not true. There are some wonderful and vibrant public school communities. Are there some struggling ones? Yeah, absolutely. But I've also seen that on the private school sector and the faith-based school sector. That's every campus has got its own unique challenges, and the stereotyping doesn't help anybody.
Mm-hmm. Very true. I know I worked in magnet schools, public schools. I didn't do private schools, but I went to private schools growing up. And I can't really recall any of the principals like being bad people, like bad leaders. Could I compare different public schools in different districts with other principals? Yes, I could say this person shines in this area versus this person might be struggling. But by no means I would say that they're a bad principal or a bad teacher because they do things different. Everyone is unique. I was just talking about that on a past episode. It's like how we all have the ability to do something in the world and in our life. And it could be very different than how someone else would do it. And it's not to say that you're doing it wrong or they're doing it wrong. You just have to figure out what is for you. And I think that there's going to be different schools for different learners. For example, some learners might do really well in a Montessori school. Some do not, right? They do not do well. So, it'll be wrong for me to say, hey, you need to put your kid in a Montessori school because it's the best learning platform for all children. No, it's not the case, right? You need to understand what type of child you have and then say, okay, this is going to be the best school for them. Now, whether that be private school or public school, you can look at funding for yourself, and some districts don't even allow you to pick your school that you want to go to. So you're going to be stuck in the school that you're assigned to. Of course, you can huff and puff and, put up a fight, and most of the districts are going to say it's not worth the trouble, and they're going to put you in your school. But you should have faith in the system. I'm saying is where if you send your kid to school, you should trust that they're going to learn, that they're going to be successful in the terms of academics. And the curriculum means well, like it wants to do well, but it's very reminiscent of the cookie cutter approach of how the politicians or superintendents or the people in charge of making the rules and regulations and scheduling the testing for the school are thinking, district wide, right? 70 schools or whatever it be. That's very difficult now to say, okay, well, the top 5 schools need this and the bottom schools need this. If you're just giving what the top 5 schools need and maybe the bottom 5 schools are struggling, left behind. One of my cooperating teachers from the high school level, he had a great saying. He goes, I know everyone might know this, right? It's basic, but we're going to start from 0. We're going to start like no one knows anything, and we're going to make sure we fill in all the holes, basically the potholes of learning, where you can be going down the line and you might have missed something, right? Or someone said something in a way that might have not really clicked with you, but then it's said in a different way from another teacher, from the professor. And it's like, okay, now I get it. It's like almost that epiphany that happens in learning. And I'm not sure if that, that has ever happened for you, but I know it happened plenty of times for me. Especially like in college, I'm like, so that's why I have to do the thesis, or that's why I have to do that. And all the stuff I might have been doing in high school, but it wasn't until I had a different teacher present it in a way that was more appropriate for how my mind was situated. Now, I say all that to say that I don't believe that it's only about the curriculum. It's only about the school. I think it's about the teacher that has so much say. And I mean, I've worked with some amazing teachers in my career, and I'm like phenomenal teachers. Very few bad teachers, very few. Like I could probably count on one hand bad teachers that I've worked with. But you have all of these phenomenal teachers, and I believe that if the student can trust a teacher, they're going to be more apt to learning very quickly. So they're going to say, oh, okay, I'm going to pay attention to you. I'm going to do what I need to do. And then the second aspect is the environment that that classroom is. If the teacher is struggling with classroom management, even though that kid might trust the teacher, it's not going to create the environment for learning. So there's many aspects that need to be in place for learning to be pronounced. And it doesn't matter about if it's private or public, I believe. I believe it's the environment for the school or for the teacher that is going to create the classroom. Because you can have a school that is in the inner city, kids are bringing drugs and guns and violence and fights every single day. And you can have one classroom that just shines above the rest. It's like, that classroom is so good, pristine. No one starts nothing in that classroom. Looking at that aspect, right? How can we get more teachers to think in that term of being a leader that is that beacon, that is that light for the school, that is that trusted individual, not only for the children, but for the parents in the school itself?
I think it starts with just the understanding of the importance of what you just articulated, right? So there is a direct line that we can draw. So when we see high levels of student achievement, what's the number one factor? It's student engagement in the learning. What's the number one factor of student engagement? It's teacher-trusted relationship. What's the number one factor of teachers developing that trusted relationship in an engaging classroom? Is fully engaged teachers. What's the number one factor for getting teachers engaged? It's a trusted relationship with their supervisor. And so it all comes back to trusted leadership. It's like the work environment influences the learning environment. And you got to get that all, when that's healthy, again, lots of good things happen. But it's also understanding the individual nature of learning. We are still struggling with a century-old antiquated system out of the Industrial Revolution where we're treating education like we're producing widgets, and it just doesn't work that way. I talk a lot with school leaders about, okay, when you look at your philosophy of education, is it outcomes-based or experience-based? And you got to think through that, because those are two very, very different approaches to learning. And so much is what has been developed. And I am a data geek. I do believe we need to assess. And I think that assessment data can help us figure out where are those gaps. You talked about identifying, right? Well, that's why we do baseline assessments. This is why we do need to, assess the students' learning. And that should guide the instruction. But we also have to understand that this is organic. These kids, we organize them by manufacturing date, right? Rather than by learning. And it's like, what are we talking about here, right? One of the classic ones is, we've recognized and know for years through both the research and practice that females will accelerate, especially in things like mathematics, faster than boys. That's not racist or sexist. It's biology, right? It's just how they mature. And yet we still put all those poor struggling boys into those classes with those really brilliant girls, and the guys feel like idiots, right? And it's just like, come on, can't we do better than this? So, and there's so many elements to why it still operates in this century-old model of a manufacturing mindset is how the school's organized, because it is efficient as a business or as an operation. But is it really what's best for learning? Really, no. But that doesn't mean we can't get creative even within those structures to figure out how do we make this more about the individual child. And the more we can be committed to that. I currently work for Houghton Academy. We're a college prep Christian academy up in Western New York. And we have a university as well. So we're a little college prep school with a college, which is great. But here I'm just so excited about what our dean does and our team here. Every student has their own individual learning plan. Right? It's no longer, here's our curriculum box and we force every kid through. No, it's what are your aspirations? Where do you want to be upon graduation? How do we create a high school pathway experience that is going to help get you energized about the learning and get you to where you want to be? And is it easy to do that? No, you got to flex structures. You got to get creative on meeting those needs. But is there a huge payoff? Oh, yeah. And we see these kids just excelling. And here we're an international school as well, so we have a large boarding program. And I see kids in a very diverse socioeconomic spectrum. It's one of the the misnomers, if I can throw this in too, when we do the public-private comparison, the majority of private school students are not from affluent families. That is such a misnomer. But it's because the movies have kind of fed us that, that idea that, all the rich kids go to private school. No. Depending on what and how the school operates, 25% of the campuses in this country are private schools. 1 out of every 4 campuses is private. It's a huge, now it only represents about 15% of the student population in the country, but this is a major part of what we're doing. And it's not a bunch of, those aren't all wealthy families. There are a lot of schools that work very, very hard to make sure that the needs of all students in their socioeconomic diversity of their communities are being met. And again, I'm just going to circle back those. It is addressing what is the baggage the student walks into that classroom with. That you got to know that. You got to be able to have a way to, how do we help support the student where they are at? One of the mantras we have here is building learning for the student's current reality and their future, not our past. And so much of what we do in schools and have done for decades is built on, I went to college in the 70s, right? And so much of the learning and what we know about learning has changed. And if I was designing learning today based on what I learned in the 70s, it would have almost no value to these students. And that doesn't mean we toss. I mean, again, universal, and there are values that you hold through. We're training up kids for careers and a future that we have no clue. Today, even just looking back 5 years ago, we were not aware of a big part of the job market that's available today. We didn't even know about 5-10 years ago. Well, the same is forecasting into the future. So what should we be caring about? What should we be focused on? We're developing kids with life skills to navigate whatever that unknown future is. Can they work in critical thinking? Can they be collaborative? Can they be globally minded? And those types of skill sets and those types of abilities that will translate to no matter where they are or what they're doing. This is where our passion should be, rather than how many AP tests did they score, a 3 and a 4 on. It's like, no, that's not the quality measure we should be looking at. And that's not to throw AP under the bus either. I think there is a place for that curriculum. But unfortunately, what I find in my conversations with a lot of parents who are well-meaning is, grade focused, right? It's like, Johnny's not getting, and it's like, yeah, but what I see in Johnny is I see creative energy. I see him producing things that are, wow, this is exciting. No, yep, he's struggling in calculus. I get it. Will he ever actually use calculus? It's a good question, right? And so, again, individualizing the educational experience is hard work and challenging and expensive, right? I mean, that's another big part of the recipe is meeting these kids' individual needs. It takes huge investment. But anyway, I'm rambling now. Michael, let me get back on track.
Either or. I just don't like interrupting people. So I allow you just to find a natural pause, and I will come in and we'll make magic together. That's how the podcast works. We're having a conversation. And one of the things about a conversation is that you can't really interrupt someone when they're, full flow, right? They're just going at it. And, that's the passion of an, educator, right? You go into the school, typically you're like, all right, I'm here, let's get to work. It's not like I'm at work, right? Teachers don't get the best salaries compared to other professions. I mean, a teacher that's tall, that's athletic, they should be in a sport if they want to make a bunch of money, right? Basketball, football, something, right? They're going to make more money, but it's not so much about making money. It's about making a difference. It's about being a pivotal pole or a pivotal part in someone's future, right? And I think that's so important that you find the people that are going to enhance not only yourselves, because you could be an adult and you can find a coach, a guide, a mentor, or someone, but then to give your child the teacher that they need, right? Because, as you said, not every kid is going to need calculus later on in life. right? But some will. So you have to figure out, where do you need them to go? It's very similar to what sports you're going to put your child in. Maybe they're really good at basketball, but maybe you were a soccer star. You're like, well, I don't care that they're good at basketball. I'm gonna put them in soccer because I was a soccer star. And so they have all of this talent that is going, in a sense, wasted because you're operating in the past. You're saying that this was what I know, right? Soccer was what I learned. And sure, right? You can put them in soccer, you could put them in basketball, and you can keep them in both, right? But then at some point, it's going to be a time constraint for him, because if he has to do all of this stuff for basketball and then learning, etc., you only get 24 hours in a day, right? So it would behoove you as a parent to say, what is my child interested in, right? Where is their passions, right? Very similar to what you were saying with the individualized learning of, okay, what do you want for now and for your future versus for, all right, this is the box of everything we need to know this year. And I don't care if you like it or not. This is what you need to know. And so we're going to teach you these things. It's what the curriculum is. And then you kind of go. And some parents are seeing that and they're saying, you know what? I can go around this, right? So then they're self-educating, they're doing homeschooling. And even that right now is shifting. We saw 4 or 5 years ago, a huge trend in homeschooling. And that is still the trend. It's still going up at a steady incline. But it's starting to change a little bit now, because now schools are getting more focused on child engagement, because schools are a business in a sense, right? They have to say, well, if we have a population of kids going down, that means we are or have lost to trust. It's like if I have a business and I'm losing clients left and right, the trust of the business is gone, right? Maybe I said something happened a couple weeks ago or months ago. I don't know if you know about movies, but the Snow White movie, right? It did terrible, right? It wasn't that the movie was bad, right? Like I'm sure if you looked at the movie and you watched it all the way through, you can say there was a lot of good parts in the movie, right? But what was happening was the trust aspect was placed there, right? There was an actor that said something about a world occurrence, and it affected people's minds in the sense of, wait, you're thinking this way, I think this way. I don't know if I trust that, right? And so Disney took a hit on that. And then the same thing is true with schools, where they took a hit during the pandemic, where they're like, my kid is not getting any learning from this Zoom call that you're in right now. So then a lot of parents took over, but then a lot of parents learned that they weren't equipped to educate their children. They don't have the learning. I couldn't imagine being an educator for my kids if I didn't go to school to be in education. Like I wouldn't do a good job. So we have to find the people that are going to be good. And so now a lot of parents are being more, I guess you can say, they want to be more thorough in where they're putting their children, right? So some parents are only putting them in 2 to 3 days out of the week, and they're saying, okay, you're going to get this bit of learning, and then we're going to supplement. And then some people, they don't have that flexibility. If we talk about rich and poor, I grew up poor. I went to private schools, and parents that don't have money, that they have to go to work a 9 to 5, they have to put their kids in school, because who else is going to watch them during the day if they can't afford home care? So they sometimes have no out. And they have to say, well, regardless of what the system is right now, whether I trust the teacher or the schools or not, I am almost at a standstill. But we are starting to see that many teachers and many schools are getting on board of saying, let's look at how we can be better for our schools and for our children, our families. And this shift, I think, is going to be something that we're going to start to see. Now, I don't know if this is going to change how the normalized schools are today, but I do want your perspective on this, because you can see the trends. You can see what is working, what is not working. Do you see schools making a comeback with the whole tug of war with homeschooling or the idea of parents not trusting in schools and teachers?
Well, for decades, Michael, we talked about school reform, and we could go back and talk about all the different initiatives over the decades that have come. And one of the real blessings of the pandemic is it launched some large spotlights onto schools, and I think is in the long run is going to have a very, very healthy effect. Is it painful when you go through change? Sure, it is. But no, I think we are in the midst of a reformation that's going on. And again, there are painful elements to that, but I think, no, there has been a huge wake-up call. I think, right, a lot of parents during the pandemic, there was a wake-up call of, oh, this is a really hard job. And I thought, oh, I could just do this. And so I think appreciation of educators and oh, no, this really is a craft. This isn't just anybody can do this because I got through school, right? I mean, every parent, many parents rather, they have this thought that, they could do the school job of a teacher or principal because they went through school, and so they think they're experts in it. It's like, it's just not quite that simple. But yes, I do see. I am a big supporter of parental choice. Again, it goes back to that commitment to individual needs of the student. So I think the more the states get behind this idea of, no, let's support our parents. Let's not be arrogant in thinking the state, has got this all figured out and parents are a bunch of idiots. No, parents love their kids. 99% of the time, they are going to make the best choice for those kids. So 99% of the time, we need to know how to empower them and let them support their child in whatever educational venue they want to pursue. And so I'm a big proponent of that. What we've also got to figure out, though, Michael, is how to attract quality young adults into the teaching profession. We have been graduating fewer and fewer teachers from our universities for years now. And you've probably seen the stats. Over 50% of teachers leave their post within the first 5 years, and most of them leave teaching. So it's not just leaving the school, they leave the profession. And so, and there's a lot of reasons why that's going on. But we've got to solve those problems too. We've got to, we shouldn't just assume, well, it's okay. I teach because I love kids and I love learning. I don't have to worry about the money. No, the money is important. In fact, there's been numerous studies on what's called contingent rewards. And even in teaching, the number one contingent reward is the money. It's like, you need to honor people. The scriptures talk about the workman is worthy of their hire. Yes, they are. And it's how people are affirmed. And they need to be able to take care of their families. And so I think we need to ramp up the compensation level of our educators across the board. And we need to be able to attract people into the profession. We need to trust them more. We need to create environments that trust them to be professionals. So we need to draw in professionals, expect them to be professional, and then empower them to be professionals rather than all these controls and assessments and measurements. It's like, no. Hire, recruit professionals, treat them as professionals, empower them as professionals, and then compensate them as professionals. And the result you'll see. And we can point to examples of that around the Finland, Singapore, and other countries we're seeing. And I want to be careful there because I know those are very different cultures too. It's not as easy as, oh, the Finns have got it all figured out and we need to just copy paste. No, it doesn't work that way. You have to contextualize best practice. But something they have done over there is they reworked their education programs in their universities, and what they're kicking out is really high quality instructors and teachers. And then they're treating them as the professionals they are, and then giving them also the freedom to do what they need to do as professionals within their professional capacities in the classrooms. And every year they're in the top 5 of the PISA results, right? It's like there's a direct correlation to how you would, again, the work environment influencing the learning environment. You get that work environment healthy and meaningful and trusted. And then the learning it exudes all the things that we desire. And it's getting back to, we got to take care of the human issues before we can really tackle the educational issues.
Yeah. And we can look at the Asian schools, for example, how they do it with, their children. There's no testing, I believe, until 3rd grade or something along those lines. And they understand that they're going to give them responsibility. So they don't necessarily have to spend all this money on janitors because the kids are cleaning the classrooms and they're doing all of these things. So they're learning responsibility at a very young age. And here we kind of put them in and we do a lot of things for our children, which is good. But, giving them the responsibilities in school as well as when they're home, right? Well, the idea of chores, right? I'm not going to pay my kids for doing chores. You live here, right? So you are going to take out the garbage. You are going to help wash the dishes. You are going to vacuum, right? There's no money associated with that. Now, that's just my own personal thing. Growing up, my mom would give us money, like $1 or something for washing the dishes, right? I'm not doing that, right? They're going to get money for things that are extra, right? So if you want to mow the grass, great. I won't call the landscaper this week. You can have the job. Washing the car, I won't go to the car wash. Here's the money, right? You can take what I was already going to spend somewhere else if you want it. But if you don't want it, then there's nothing that's going to go in your pocket. You have to earn what you want. Now, I know there's some people who are like, if my kids want something like a video game or something, like they have to go and save and do all these things. And this is great, right? But at the end of the day, you get to decide, basically in a nutshell of what I'm saying for parents, is that you get to decide what you're going to instill in your child. You get to help them be in the environment that you will like. For example, my mom, she worked 2-3 jobs, single mom at the time, putting us through school. And it was my brother, my sister, and myself. And that's a lot of money for private schooling, right? And so that was K-8, even preschool. She put us in a private, a preschool. And then for high school, my sister and I, we went to a private high school, and my brother, he went to a trade school. So it was nice for my parents for that first, couple of years. They didn't have to pay anything for my brother, but they wanted us to go off, get a good education. So they knew our environment, which was the inner city, wasn't good. Where if I was going to those schools, I was going to be introduced to drugs and alcohol and violence at a very young age. And it's not to say that I would have adapted that lifestyle, but today we would never know because I was not in it. And by the time I developed and I was put into high school, even though you went to high school, like private high school, there's still going to be some of that outside stimulus of the city coming into the schools. But it wasn't enough to say, let me follow this life, right? Like I already was on the path of what I needed to be or to do. And so, all of that's to say to, parents that, we can put trust in the schools still. Like we can put trust in the educators. And I see, just from looking at things, that there is going to be a swing. There's going to be a shift. I don't know how many years. It could be in 1 year, 2 years, right? Like it can happen that quick. I'm not going to make up a number or anything, but you just have to see, like how your child is developing and how they're learning. Are they happy where they are? Like, are they getting everything they need for their future? And if not, are you supplementing that? So you can get them a tutor. You can do the work yourself. And you can ask the teachers for resources of the school saying, hey, where is my kid really good at? Where's their passions? Like when you're working with them, they're lighting up, etc. All of these things, like you can have communications, build the relationships with teachers. They're not bad people, so be able to, not be a stranger in your child's learning and development. It's not something where you say, all right, you're going to go to school and the school's going to do everything that you need to know for the real world. Because if you do that, you're going to set them up for failure when they're 18. They're not ready for the real world yet. So you have to make sure that as they're progressing, you're giving them what they need rather than waiting to the end and saying, okay, let's hurry up and get everything. It doesn't work that way. So we have to do the work as we're moving. And our conversation is definitely just the starting point for parents or educators to begin the aspect, not only to enhance learning and engagement in our children and our students, but then to also have teachers come with their superintendents or principals or other teachers and professionals around them to say, okay, how can we help each other, right? That's going to also continue to build trust in the system. And from there, regardless of what happens in the world or the district, even, you can have one school that sets itself apart because there are people that know they can rely on people. And that's that says so much. So, as we are wrapping up, I would love to get some final words from you. And then to also share with us some links, whether it be the school that you're working at, if you would like, people to inquire about that school, about your work, for any speaking engagements that you do for a school, where either a principal can reach out to you or a parent can recommend you to their school. Any of those things will help tremendously.
Thank you, Michael. Again, I'm at Houghton Academy, just houghtonacademy.org. Again, we are a day and boarding school. We are international, so we do have kids here from, I think, currently 13, 14 countries, but we have U.S. students boarding here as well. We are 6 through 12, secondary only, and it is a college preparatory program within a Christian worldview. And we have Houghton University. We actually share campus. In fact, the majority of our juniors and seniors actually sit in university courses with university professors. So one of the uniquenesses of our program here. I also serve as an executive consultant with a global school consulting group. You can just Google that or find me on LinkedIn, Dr. Toby Travis, and also through School Right and the assessments that I use with helping schools assess their trust levels and the data we use to develop school improvement plans is in partnership with the School Right organization. I'm very thankful for their expertise in securing reliable data. But I also work as a mentor, currently mentoring a number of school administrators. Frequently what's going on, Michael, another observation is because of the teacher and the administrator shortage, you've got young men and women stepping into administration who really don't have a background or training, but they get a passion. And so one of the joys that I have is mentoring a number of school leaders in a variety of school settings. And it's turning out, again, I think, to be a really successful part of what I get to have the privilege of being a part of, because I think that is also part of the solution, is finding passionate people who are willing to be reflective, willing to go back and learn what they need to learn and get involved. And Michael, if you'll permit me, I want to throw one more comment in that I just really resonate with what you were saying in your last statements there to parents, is we've known this for years, but it's more true today than ever. Students succeed to a higher degree to the level in which parents are engaged in the learning. And that doesn't mean that you necessarily have to be homework hawks, but just interested, engaged. And there's a balance there, that we know about the helicopter parents, right, who are too engaged. Let the professionals be the professionals, but show your children that you care and that you're interested and you want to hear and you want to know and you want to support them in their passions and in their interests, and you want to fuel that. The more parents do that, the greater the success they're going to see in their children. And so just always encourage moms and dads as much as possible. Be curious with your child's curiosity and feed that. And that's a winning tool for seeing your child succeed. One more, and I'm sorry, I should always plug the book. Trust Ed, The Bridge to School Improvement is on Amazon. It may sound self-serving. No education authors I know make a big living off of writing books. That's not what it's about. But the feedback that I've received over the years now is just how the framework that's in the book has helped so many. And so I just encourage also teachers, school leaders, administrators, aspiring leaders. But check out the book. And it doesn't matter if you're in the ed sector or not. The book has shown up in Forbes now, I think 3 times. And because the principles there are really universal, although the illustrations are all in the ed sector. But it's just called Trust Ed, The Bridge to School Improvement. And your listeners can find that on Amazon.
Perfect. And I will put all the links and also the book in the description box below. We didn't get into the book or the framework or, like some of the philosophies of it, but I know the conversation is going to be very reminiscent of it. So when you do purchase the book and when you do dive into it, you're going to learn, or you're going to be reading many of the things that we have been speaking about today. But then we have to also look at the deeper dive, right? What do we do next? And so I encourage parents, I encourage educators, teachers, administrators to do the work, to not only listen to this episode, but to share the episode, to, inquire, to learn about the book, to implement the things that they learn in the book, or maybe the things that they have learned today. Begin to strengthen the relationships, because just from speaking with you today, I can tell you have the energy. I can tell you have the passion. You remind me of so many wonderful teachers that I have worked with. And, it's a good feeling to know that there's people who care about the children, who care about the system, and who want the world, in a sense, or America at this point, but you work at an international school, so it might be the world for you, to not only be educated, but to be ready for the future. So I do want to thank you, Dr. Toby, for coming on, spending some time talking about your work.